The air hung heavy, thick with the stench of gunpowder and fear. The ground, usually vibrant with life, was marred by dark, spreading stains. Scattered amongst the acacia trees lay the bodies of his family, their eyes forever staring at the crimson sunset. The young calf, barely more than a year old, trembled, his tiny trunk wrapped around the trunk of his lifeless mother. He trumpeted, a thin wail of despair that echoed through the savannah unanswered. He nudged his mother, desperate for her to rise, to comfort him. Her scent, the scent that meant home and safety, was fading, replaced by the metallic tang of blood. Night fell, draping the world in shadows. The hyenas came, drawn by the promise of an easy meal, their cackles echoing the calf's own terror. He huddled closer to his mother's still form, too young to understand, too afraid to flee. The sun rose, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold, a cruel mockery of the previous day's beauty. The vultures had arrived, their silhouettes stark against the rising sun. The calf watched, numb, as they descended upon his family, their beaks tearing, their screeches adding to the symphony of his despair. Hunger gnawed at his belly, thirst parched his throat, but fear kept him rooted to the spot. As the sun reached its zenith, a new sound reached him. It was a low rumble, the engine of a vehicle, its approach heralding the arrival of more humans. He knew their scent, the scent of death. He closed his eyes, waiting for the end. But the end never came. Instead, he felt strong hands on his body, heard gentle voices speaking in soothing tones. He was lifted, carried away from the carnage, away from the only home he had ever known. The Peterson family found him there, a tiny echo in the vast wilderness, clinging to the memory of his mother. Sarah, her eyes red-rimmed with tears, cradled the orphaned calf, his skin surprisingly smooth under her calloused fingers. John, her husband, a large man with a gentle heart, watched with a mixture of sadness and trepidation. They knew the risks, the challenges of raising a wild animal, but they couldn't leave him to die. Their farm, nestled on the edge of the savannah, became his sanctuary. The scent of hay and the lowing of cattle replaced the familiar smells and sounds of his lost home. He was christened Tembo, meaning elephant in Swahili, a name that spoke of their hopes for his future. At first, Tembo refused to eat, his tiny body racked with grief and fear. Sarah coaxed him with warm milk and sweet potatoes, her voice a soothing balm to his wounded soul. Slowly, tentatively, Tembo began to heal. He explored his new surroundings, his trunk investigating everything: the rough bark of the baobab tree, the smooth surface of the water trough, the soft hair of Emily, the Petersons' young daughter. Emily, with her infectious laughter and boundless energy, became his constant companion. She would sit for hours, her back against his massive leg, reading to him, sharing her childish secrets. Life on the farm found a new rhythm, a delicate dance between the ordinary and the extraordinary. The sun rose and set, painting the African sky in a myriad of colors. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. Tembo grew, his once tiny frame transforming into a symbol of strength and resilience. Yet, beneath the surface, the memory of his family's slaughter lingered, a shadow in his intelligent eyes. 2 years had passed since Tembo's arrival. He was no longer the frightened calf, lost and alone. He towered over Emily now, his playful nudges sending her tumbling into the soft grass. John had built him a sturdy enclosure, a haven where he could retreat when the world became too much. But it was the love, the unwavering acceptance of the Petersons that truly made him feel safe, that filled the void left by his lost family. He would follow Sarah around the farm, his trunk gently wrapping around her waist as she tended to her vegetable garden. He delighted in helping John with the chores, his massive head pushing against stubborn gates, his trunk lifting heavy buckets with surprising ease. He listened with rapt attention as Emily recounted her day at school, his deep rumbles a reassuring chorus to her animated tales. At night, under the vast African sky, they would gather around a crackling fire. John would recount stories of his own childhood. Sarah would sing softly in her melodic voice, and Emily would trace patterns on Tembo's leathery hide. In these moments, surrounded by their love, Tembo felt a sense of belonging, a feeling of family he thought he had lost forever. But their idyllic world, built on love and trust, was not immune to the intrusions of the outside world. The whispers started subtly, rumors of a giant elephant residing on the Peterson farm. Soon, whispers turned into hushed conversations, curiosity morphing into fear. And then one day, the whispers materialized, taking the form of a sleek, black car that rolled into their driveway, casting a long, ominous shadow across their tranquil existence. Section 4. The Shadow of Authority. The man stepped out of the car, his crisp uniform at odds with the rural surroundings. He introduced himself as Mr. Thompson, an officer from the Wildlife Conservation Society. His voice was smooth, his words carefully chosen, but his eyes held a coldness that sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. He had come for Tembo. "He's endangered, you see," Mr. Thompson explained, his gaze sweeping over Tembo, who stood protectively beside Emily. "He needs to be in a sanctuary, a place where he can be with his own kind, where he can roam free." John argued, his voice rough with emotion, that Tembo was happy, that he was part of their family, but Mr. Thompson remained unmoved. "It's against the law," he stated flatly, his words a death knell to their hopes. "You have no right to keep him here." He produced a document, the official seal a stark symbol of their powerlessness. They were given a week, 7 days to say goodbye to the creature who had become an integral part of their lives. That night, as the fire crackled and the crickets chirped their nocturnal symphony, the Petersons huddled together, their faces etched with despair. Emily, her eyes red and swollen from crying, clung to Tembo's trunk, her small body trembling with silent sobs. They talked late into the night, their words tumbling over each other, a desperate attempt to find a solution where none existed. But as the first rays of dawn painted the sky in hues of pink and orange, they knew what they had to do. They wouldn't let Tembo go. They had saved him once from the clutches of death, and they would do it again, even if it meant defying the law, even if it meant putting themselves in harm's way. Their decision was made, their resolve strengthened by the fierce love for the magnificent creature who had become their family. Section 5. Blood on the Savannah. The week passed in a blur of frantic activity and quiet moments of shared grief. John reinforced Tembo's enclosure, transforming it into a fortress. Sarah contacted lawyers, journalists, anyone who would listen to their plight. But their efforts proved futile. The authorities were undeterred, their minds made up. The day of reckoning dawned, the sky heavy with unshed rain. 2 jeeps arrived, filled with men in uniform, their faces grim, their eyes hard. Mr. Thompson emerged from the lead vehicle, his expression implacable. He had come to enforce the law, blind to the love and compassion that bound the Petersons and Tembo together. John stood firm, his shotgun held loosely by his side, a symbol of their defiance. "This doesn't have to end badly," Mr. Thompson warned, his voice devoid of emotion. "Just hand over the elephant and we'll be on our way." But John stood his ground, his voice unwavering. "He's family," he stated simply, his gaze unwavering. "And we protect our own." A tense silence descended, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the distant cry of a bird. Then, all hell broke loose.